One day this March, third grade teacher Diana Ortega had just finished lunch and was scrolling through social media in her school lunchroom when a shocking video popped up. It showed U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents forcibly detaining and handcuffing a woman at San Francisco International Airport. In the video, a young girl stands nearby, her hair tied with colorful rubber bands, watching and crying in anguish. Bystanders ask the agents to identify themselves.
Where's your badge? Can I see? Let me see your badge. Okay. No, can I see your badge? I don't know if that's legitimate.
Is this nice?
I thought, that woman looks familiar. And I was like, that kind of looks like Wendy's mom. And then I was like, could that be? No. And so I remember trying to freeze the video. Could that be her? Like, I was in disbelief. Like, I didn't want to believe that that could be what I was seeing.
It was. The child was one of Diana's students at Downer Elementary School in San Pablo in the East Bay. She was a quiet and shy 9-year-old girl named Wendy, who worked hard to learn her multiplication tables and who would write sweet notes for her teacher. Her first language was Mam, a Mayan language from Guatemala, and she was learning both Spanish and English.
She didn't let the language become an issue for her. She did her best. She did not let it stump her or stop her from trying to participate. So I was impressed by that. I thought, wow, she is not gonna be like boxed in, as somebody who doesn't know.
A few days before the incident at the airport, Wendy had told her teacher she was going to visit a relative in Florida, and Diana gave her a homework packet to work on while she was away.
I just remember thinking, wow, I wish, you didn't have to go, because we had a field trip that next day, and she wasn't able to attend the field trip. And I said, that's okay, you can go on the next one. But I never thought that, she would not return.
2 days after Wendy and her mother were detained in the airport, they were deported to Guatemala. This is Education Beat, getting to the heart of California schools. I'm Zaidee Stavely. This week, more than 400 California children deported by the Trump administration. Under the current Trump administration, nearly 700 children in California were detained and more than 400 were deported between January 20th, 2025 and March 10th, 2026. That's according to an EdSource analysis of immigration and customs enforcement data obtained by the Deportation Data Project at UC Berkeley and UCLA. My colleague Emma Gallegos analyzed the data. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Zaidee.
So several months ago, you came to me with this idea of looking up data to see how many kids have been detained and deported under Trump. Why did you want to do this story?
There have been some of these really high-profile stories about kids, really young kids, sometimes being detained and in some cases deported. I think about 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos in Minnesota, the little boy with the blue bunny hat who was detained. And then also closer to home, Joseph Londano Rodriguez, a 6-year-old at the California School for the Deaf. And these stories, they've just been heart-wrenching in some of these communities. And so I'm thinking, well, how many Liams are there? How many Josephs are there? And this isn't something that I'd noticed many people writing about, and definitely not in California. So I had no clue the scale of children being detained and deported was. And so there's the Deportation Data Project has some of this data. It just took a little bit of sorting to figure out what was going on in California.
And for those who don't know, Emma is being sarcastic. It took a lot of sorting. So, Emma, what did you find looking through this data?
So the number we found is that there are 666 children. That's anyone under 18 who were detained under the Trump administration. And we found that many more of those kids were deported. So under Trump, 61% of children were deported. Under Biden, it was 7%. I think the biggest finding was that more children who were being detained were coming from California communities, from the interior. So under Biden, you see that there are quite a few minors coming in through the border and being detained. And what's happening under Trump is there are children who are living in communities, interior communities like Bakersfield, where I live, or just cities all around the state. They're being detained there and ultimately deported. And so that's a very different pattern going into the interior versus the border, which is what was happening under Biden.
I know both of us reached out to the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. You got a response from them. Can you share what they said?
Yeah, they said a couple different things. They said that ICE does not separate families. They said that parents are asked if they want to be removed with their children, or they say that ICE will place children with a safe person the parent designates. So this is their response to family detention centers like South Texas. They're saying, hey, we're keeping families together and we're letting parents decide. They reiterated that their goal is to arrest and deport criminal illegal aliens, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, gang members, and terrorists. And the spokesperson also said that the data is being cherry-picked to peddle a false narrative. And I do want to say that we're EdSource. We care about children in California. And so we just looked at what is happening to children. They consider that cherry-picking. I don't think there are any children, or at least very, very few, who had any kind of criminal record. And so I asked about this. I said, why are you detaining children who don't have a criminal record? And the spokesperson said, many of these individuals counted as non-criminals are actually terrorists, human rights abusers, gangsters, and more. They just don't have a rap sheet in the U.S. And then they added, every single one of these individuals committed a crime when they came into this country illegally. And so they also said the Deportation Data Project relies on information releases that have not been reviewed, audited, or given context. And they said that neither DHS nor ICE have verified the accuracy, methodology, or analysis of the project and its results.
Why does EdSource believe that the Deportation Data Project data is methodologically sound?
The Deportation Data Project has sued ICE to release data. And so that data that they get from ICE, they take and they process it in a way that makes it comprehensible. So this is information that is directly from ICE.
According to the Department of Homeland Security, Wendy and her mother had first been detained near the border in Arizona in 2018, when Wendy was not yet 2 years old, and then released with an order to appear in court. They attended some hearings, but not others, and they were ordered deported in 2019 at a hearing they did not attend. Wendy's deportation triggered a wave of grief and anger among the other students in Diana Ortega's class.
There was one student from the class who came up to me at lunch and she said, Ms. Ortega, the students are saying that Wendy was taken by ICE. And I said, yes, I heard that, maybe we can talk about this in the classroom, And so I said to the class, have you heard about this? And pretty much all but two of the kids had heard about it.
The West Contra Costa Unified School District sent counselors to talk with the kids and ask them how they were feeling. Diana says some students said they were sad or angry.
A lot of them were, scared. Some of them said, oh, she was deported. That means we won't see her for another 10 years. So I was kind of shocked that they knew that. I don't know specifically how the law works, but that if you are deported, that you can't come back. So they were already thinking are we ever going to see her again?
Soon afterward, Diana noticed something on the desk where Wendy used to sit.
They put cards that they wrote for her, I love you, Wendy, or, here's Wendy and here's us in front of the school, or here's us, playing. Some of them made their envelopes very fancy. They made paper flowers and they even put candy. I gave them some Jolly Ranchers to put in the homemade flowers.
To help them process their grief, Diana had the whole class write a poem about Wendy, with the first letter of each line spelling out her name. It reads, Wendy, el color azul era su favorito. No hablaba mucho. Daba felicidad. Yo soy su amigo. Wendy, the color blue was her favorite. She was quiet. She brought happiness. I am her friend.
when we were writing, I had to remind them to use the present tense because they were saying, era, Wendy era, or she was my friend, talking about her in the past tense, like as if it was a death. And I said, no, she's still out there and she's still our friend and we can still think about her and never forget her.
Wendy and her mother didn't spend time in a detention center. They were first held in a holding room in the San Francisco airport for one night. Then they were flown to McAllen, Texas, and booked into a hotel before being flown to Guatemala. But many children are spending long periods of time in detention centers. Emma, can you share more about what you found as far as length of detention?
Yeah, so when we look nationally, children are spending longer in detention under Trump than they were under Biden. So the median length of detention was 1 day under Biden. It has gone up to 8 days. So they're spending 8 times longer. And, the median, that is an average. There's one court testimony where there was a 12-year-old child who was in there for over 64 days. So there are also quite a few of these children are being detained for very long amounts of time. And so part of what that means is also that on any given day, when you look at how many children are being detained in the United States, it's shot up tenfold when you compare the last year of the Biden administration to the first year of the second Trump administration. So under the last year of the Biden administration, there were on average 23 children held in detention a day. And during the first year of Trump's second term, that figure rose to 219. And in January of 2026, there were 566 children in detention on one single day. And just to jog everyone's memory, this is kind of the same time that there were a lot of very high profile ICE raids in cities everywhere. But one of the most high profile was in the Twin Cities. So this is during that same month. So that is when things are peaking.
Do we have a sense of why that is happening?
So there's a couple different things going on that I think are behind this change when I talk to experts. One of the things that they brought up was this 1997 court agreement that provides rights for immigrant children who are in U.S. custody. And one of the parts of this agreement is that it prohibits children being detained more than 20 days, except in emergencies. And so the Trump administration is in court right now fighting back against this. It feels hamstrung by this agreement. And so that is one factor, this legal factor. Biden was trying to follow the Flores agreement and prohibit these long stays. And just there were, again, like I said, most of these children were coming in through the border. And so he was trying to, detain kids, but then get them quickly back into communities with families. And so we don't see that happening. Another thing is that Trump has brought back family detention. What we see with a lot of children in California, they are detained in California and then they are sent to South Texas to a family facility that reopened. So Biden closed down this family detention facility and Trump reopened it. And so we see a lot of children are being sent there with their families. So there was a movement against family detention under Biden, and that has been brought back under Trump. So that's another piece of what's happening and why you see children who are there for so long.
Okay, you found a declaration that was made in federal court by a 12-year-old from Los Angeles who described their experience living inside the South Texas Family Residential Center during a 64-day detainment together with their parents and younger sister. Can you describe what that 12-year-old said for our listeners?
Yeah, this individual only identified as GS said, it makes me feel hopeless to be here for so long because now it'll take me and my whole family a long time to get back to normal because of how much money and education we have lost. So this individual said that, their family lost their apartments and belongings, and just basically described sounding really miserable. And they said, if I could change one thing here, it would be to shut down this whole facility.
Emma, what does research tell us about what happens to kids when they're in detention?
There's been a lot of research and a lot of high-profile medical associations, Pediatric, the American Medical Association, have come out writing an open letter saying that, detention itself poses a threat to child health. So they talk a lot about how, it's really bad for children's mental health. And they say even one day is too much. And so that's why even the Department of Homeland Security Advisory Committee in 2016 recommended discontinuing the use of family detention, saying this is never in the best interest of children. And, I talked to an advocate who said, we're harming a generation of kids long term. She said the kids that are in detention facilities, they're losing their childhoods every single day that they're in there.
And I actually spoke with a woman named Michelle Brené, and she was the immigration detention ombudsman under the Biden administration. She now leads the nonprofit Together and Free, which supports asylum-seeking families. And so basically, she's been visiting family detention centers for many years. She said, quote, "You see kids with extreme depression. You see kids really regressing, kids going back to wetting the bed after they've been trained for years." And she also mentioned a 7-year-old girl who stopped eating and had to be bottle fed by her mother. The other thing that she told me is that there's also a difference, which doesn't show up in the data, but that she's seeing, which is that there's more of a focus on kind of detaining families in an unexpected way or in a way where they don't get any notice. She said, even in cases where removal is determined to be the right step, previous administrations would sometimes schedule deportations after the school year to avoid disrupting kids' education, or they would, give notice to families about their deportation and give them a date so that they could sell their house or close their bank accounts or wrap things up, basically. And that is not happening now.
Yeah. And this 12-year-old child, GS, describes, some of the real trauma that comes with the way that this all unfolded. Her family was going to a routine ICE hearing and didn't expect anything to happen. And so this is what happened to GS's family. And, they said, before I was just going to school, study. And then all of a sudden I'm being yanked out of my community, and my family are, struggling, and they're losing everything. They didn't know that this was coming, and they have family on the outside, but the family's not able to help them. And, this GS is a 12-year-old, and so is old enough to kind of understand what's going on and all the things that are wrong with what's happening. They talk about their parents not getting the medical care they need and how horrible it is just to witness what's happening. So, even what's happening to adults in ICE detention also has effects on their whole family, of course.
Emma, what do you hope that readers and listeners take away from this?
I think that what you and I have tried to do in this story is both zoom in on you zoomed in kind of on this individual case and how it's affecting, a teacher, a community, a school. And what I've been trying to do is show the scale of what's happening. And so I hope what readers can do is understand that, we're trying our best to get these individual stories and how it's affecting children and schools, but also give you an idea of what the scale of what's happening too, because we're not able to get all 666 of those stories, but we can tell you that there are at least 666 of them.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Sure.
The dramatic arrest of Wendy's mother in front of Wendy sparked outrage among bystanders and politicians. Congresswoman Doris Matsui, who represents Sacramento, and State Senator Scott Wiener both denounced the detention. In April, students at Downer Elementary School organized an assembly to protest Wendy's deportation. They designed posters and wrote speeches.
And then some of the girls in the class, they shared what it was like to be Wendy's friend. She laughed when we played hide and go seek. She was always a good person. She got along well with everybody, and students spoke about what happened with the deportation and their feelings around that. And, a lot of the older kids spoke more about how it wasn't fair, what happened, how things went down.
The last week of school, Deanna projected a slideshow of photos of her students from throughout the school year. And there was Wendy dancing to La Bamba for Hispanic Heritage Month. And again, Wendy celebrating Halloween with her classmates. Even at the end of the school year, months after the deportation, Diana's students reminded her of Wendy's absence every day.
Even now, like if I take attendance, I'll say, oh, so-and-so is absent and so-and-so is absent. And they'll say, oh, and Wendy, she's not here.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Education Beat, getting to the heart of California schools, a production of EdSource. You can find a link to my story and Emma's story in our podcast notes and at edsource.org. Our producer is Coby McDonald. Special thanks to our guest Diana Ortega and reporter Emma Gallegos. Thanks also to editor-at-large John Fensterwald, and to Daniel J. Willis and Sunny Xie for their help with the data for this project. Our theme music is from Blue Dot Sessions. This episode was brought to you by Sobrato Philanthropies and the Chamberlain Education Foundation. I'm Zaidee Stavely. Join us next week and subscribe so you won't miss an episode.